Hey y'all, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Vashti Sarah, and you are plugged into All the Things, where we literally talk about all the things. So last week we talked about what marriage isn't, and we went in detailed and just hashed out all the myths of marriage, what we expect marriage to be based on what society says. And this week, I want to talk about what marriage is, because that's a beautiful thing and it's a journey together. And, you know, there's so much to celebrate in marriage. There's so much beauty in it. But I think so often we focus on the negative side of marriages. And I see that in social media, especially. I know a lot of reels and videos are meant for joke, but a lot of jokes have some truth to them. And a lot of times when we post these videos and post these, stories and share these like so-called funny moments and like crazy things husbands do or things that wives do, we kind of paint a picture of, wow, marriage is pretty sucky. Marriage is miserable. Men are always miserable. Women are always controlling. And while to some degree that may be true, because women do have the tendency to be a little bit more, forward, and men do have the tendency to become a little bit more relaxed when they get married. That's not the truth about what marriage is. That doesn't encompass everything that marriage entails. And, today I just want to talk about the good side of marriage, not just the good side of marriage, but what marriage should be, what it is. It's a journey together. And, before we get into anything, marriage is biblical. That's just the nature of it. That's the foundation of marriage. Marriage is biblical. It's something that the Lord designed and created for us human beings to somewhat give the imagery of what the bride of Christ will look like. And culture kind of is moving away from it. And I mentioned that in my episode about the consequences of sex before marriage. But culture shifts what marriage should be and what it should like. Now you don't need to form a legal bond or a covenant with each other. It's, hey, where you want to get married? We're basically having sex and we're basically married, when basically married isn't married. And the design of marriage, God created it through his grace. God created it for long suffering. God created it for one man, one woman. It's a heterosexual relationship. It's between just a man and a woman, despite what society says, despite what culture says. Marriage is public. Marriage is something that you have decided to do in front of a public audience, saying, I am dedicating my life to this individual for the rest of my life. Marriage is consent. I know for a lot of traditions, there are marriages that are, arranged, but marriage does require consent. God is not a God that forces you to love. And likewise, marriage, because it's a reflection of the bride of Christ and a relationship with Christ, we shouldn't be forced to love someone either, but that's a topic for another day. But yeah, marriage is a voluntary sexual and public social union of one man and one woman from different families, different cultures. And that union should be who we represent in the church. That union should be what we represent in society. But more so, it should be what we represent behind closed doors. So before we go into anything more, I just wanted to lay that foundation that marriage is biblical. Marriage is what God designed humans to engage in. It should be something that we desire. And not saying that everyone desires it. Some of us are called to celibacy. Some of us are called to singlehood. And I believe Paul spoke about that heavily in the New Testament. However, he said, if you're burning with passion, just go on and get married, because there's no reason to live in sin. And as much as sex is a beautiful thing, as much as sex is wonderful, it was designed to be done in marriage, because it's a union. You're joining two entities into one. So just wanted to hash that out before we get into today's episode. So marriage, the first thing I want to talk about is the foundation, or the second thing I want to talk about marriage is the foundation of love. So marriage is deeply intimate. It's a commitment between two individuals who choose to share their lives, their joys, their challenges. It's grounded in a foundation of love, respect, trust, mutual support. At its core, marriage is a journey of growth and exploration where both partners work together to create a meaningful life. So that doesn't mean that it's roses and daisies, like I mentioned in the last episode. It's not all fun and dandy every single day, but it is rooted in love. I love my husband, and I tell him all the time, something that I do that like freaks him out sometimes, and I promise I'm not crazy, but there'll be mornings, or most mornings, I wake up before him and I'll just lay there and just stare at him because he's just so, like, I tell him all the time, you are 99.99% perfect. And yes, that's an exaggeration, but I do value him and I love him so much. And I look at him, and yes, he has flaws just as I have flaws, but I look beyond the flaws. I see the man that I love, that I'm deeply committed to. And sure, some of y'all may say, oh, you're still in the honeymoon phase. Y'all, I am 2.5 years in, and I am praying that I still feel the same way 50 years down the road for my husband, because it's so wonderful. We have our moments, we have moments where we disrespect each other. We have moments where, we've lost trust, maybe not really. We haven't really lost trust. I'll take that back. We support each other, but there are different areas in our lives where we're currently working on, but the root of our relationship is founded on love, not sexual love, not physical love, not emotional love, but love for the Lord first. My love for God and Jared's love for God brought us to each other. And in the secular sector, that concept may not be understood because typically love is first rooted in the physical. And we see that's why so often the divorce rate keeps going up, because the root of that marriage, the foundation of that marriage, wasn't anything of substance, essential substance, that is, because physical touch, sex is important. But if it's rooted in Christ, if it's rooted in you and that person that you're pursuing is choosing to pursue Christ daily, you guys will slowly end up connecting with each other. It's like a triangle. You're here, the guy's here, and you guys are pursuing the same thing, same God. And that love just deepens more and more. And I hope that analogy made sense, but it's rooted in love. It's rooted in a bond. The foundation of our marriage is rooted in Christ first, and that is Christ's love. So, for those of you who are thinking about getting married, who are married, and you're saying, Vashti, well, I don't know what the foundation of my relationship with my spouse is. I would suggest, if you're a believer, go seek some time in prayer and ask the Lord to reveal to you where the foundation of your marriage started off. And that's not to say it's doomsday. You started off because, you guys were intimate already, or because, it was a high school sweetheart and just felt obligated to, or because everyone was pressuring you to. If that's the reason, God can still heal and redeem that marriage, because marriage, it's a covenant. It's between a man and a woman. And the Lord said, let whoever brings these two together, no one shall separate. So in order to not separate, in order to not ruin that marriage, it requires you to seek and figure out, where did that foundation start, and reevaluate. And God can heal that. God can redeem that. The next thing I want to talk about is partnership and collaboration. Marriage is about walking side by side with someone. It's about facing trials and triumphs together. It's about valuing each other's opinions, making decisions as a team, being willing to compromise. It's a constant dance that we're doing. There's certain times I'm in the lead. There's certain times he's in the lead. And, both individuals contribute to the growth of the relationship. There will be moments where you, as the spouse, you're just going through a time where you need your partner, you need your husband, you need your wife to pick up the slack and carry you because you are struggling, vice versa. But marriage is about working together. There's not just one person that's dictating this relationship. Marriage is about unity. Marriage is about partnership. Marriage is about collaboration. Marriage is not one person making all the decisions, one person making all the rules. The foundation and the biblical view of marriage is, yes, the man is the head of the home. The woman is supposed to submit to the man. But I love whenever preachers say this, the man might be the head, but the woman turns the head. The woman is the neck. And that's not to say the woman controls what the man does, but I think too often, especially for women like myself, who we're very independent, we're very domineering, we know what we want, we're go-getters, it can be scary to think about marriage. And I was scared to be in marriage, but I was telling a friend recently, she asked me, how did you know you were ready for marriage? Because you're so independent, you're such a go-getter. How did you know you were ready? And I told her, I knew I was ready to be married. Because there was a point in a relationship where I was like, I'm not ready yet. Not ready yet. I love you, but I'm not ready yet. And there was a shift in my heart. And I knew, I told God, whenever it's time, prepare my heart. I knew I was ready when I was ready and willing to submit. I knew I was ready when selfishness was no longer a part of my vocabulary. I wanted to be selfless. I wanted to serve. I wanted to submit. I wanted to be along the journey with Jared. I wanted to walk through life with him. And that's when I knew. I was like, okay, I am ready now, because I love travel. I love traveling. I love, my girl time and being a part of different things. I love having a busy schedule, and we still have a busy schedule. We still travel. We still do all the things. But I'm doing that with someone that I've committed my life to for the rest of my life. So, marriage is walking side by side, and it can be fearful, or it can be something that's, daunting, because especially if you're an individual who's very strong-headed, the idea of submitting, the idea of bouncing ideas with someone else can be daunting. You've made decisions all your life on your own, or for majority of your adult life on your own. And now you have to pitch ideas with someone else. You have to collaborate with someone else. But that's the beauty of it. You weren't meant to do life alone. You weren't meant to walk this journey alone. And, my husband, we talk about financial things. We talk about decisions. We talk about how we're going to raise our children. We talk about how, we're doing ministry, and I pitch my ideas, he pitches his, we talk through things, and there are moments where we don't come to a conclusion, and it's just, we're going to shelf that one for now, and we're going to revisit later, or we have to pray about it. And, I love our relationship because it's not him domineering me, I'm domineering him, or anything like that. We work together. Now, is it always easy? No. There are moments I am gung-ho about what I want. There are moments where he's gung-ho about where he wants. But what I love about my spouse, he is phenomenal about not allowing that conflict or that disagreement, or where we didn't meet eye to eye, to ruin what we have. So we shelf it, we revisit it, and we work through it. And oftentimes we meet eye to eye. Oftentimes we have a middle ground. So it's about facing trials together. It's about facing triumphs together. It's about walking side by side. It's about just doing life together, being okay with the other person's opinions. And with that, I will say, before you enter into a relationship, make sure that you are talking through all the foundational issues, hardcore things that are deal breakers. Abortion, whether or not you and your spouse agree with it, political views, racial views, biblical views. All these things are critical to work through before you get before you get into marriage, because they will come up again, and it will only cause a rift. And if you can talk through those things, come to an agreement, not to submit and say, well, I'll just believe whatever he believes because he's the man, or I'll just believe whatever she believes because she has a degree or she's smarter. No. Y'all work through that together. Y'all walk through those opinions together. Y'all walk through those thoughts and processes together. And oftentimes it might need someone else in the room, another pastor, another mentor, someone to help navigate the conversation and keep things flowing. Another thing, which goes along with my previous point on partnership and collaboration, is communication and connection. Communication is the lifeline of marriage. It involves listening, sharing thoughts, feelings, being vulnerable with each other. When couples communicate effectively, they create a safe space where they can understand each other deeply and work through challenges together. I've stressed this over and over and over in any relationship episode, any episode that touches on marriage, dating, relationships. Communication is important. And it's wild that I'm saying that because I feel somewhat hypocritical because in the past I hated communication. It was hard for me to express how I feel because I grew up very quiet. I grew up the only girl. I just listened and I obliged, and I'm just a black and white yes and no doer and go-getter. I would rarely share my opinions. Now I do. I married a spouse that is okay with me sharing how I feel and expressing my feelings. There are moments that it's harder for me to express those because emotions are all over the place and I'm bubbling over and I can't get out the words, but communication is key. You can't go into a relationship thinking that you can just bottle everything up, hide your feelings, and, eventually things will get okay. No, eventually things will blow up. Eventually the poop will hit the fan. And when it hits the fan, it'll splatter everywhere, not just on you, on your spouse, and everyone else who is in the vicinity. So I'll stress that over and over and over and over. Communication is key. If you haven't mastered communication, which you probably never will because it's hard. Humans change. We shift and change as time's changing, but find someone to talk to. Find resources. There are a plethora of resources out there to help you navigate and work through communicating and learning proper tools to communicate with each other. Next thing is nurturing intimacy. This is a big one. Intimacy extends beyond physical affection. It's about emotional closeness, trust, understanding. Couples should nurture intimacy by spending quality time with each other, engaging in meaningful conversation, and continually exploring new ways to connect both emotionally and physically. This is something that Jared and I are really great at least in this season. I'm sure there will be times in our life where we're so busy that nurturing intimacy we'll have to really work towards. But right now, it has been phenomenal. Even before we got married, we did Monday night Bible studies, and that was our way of nurturing intimacy. Not that we were engaging in sex or intimacy physically, but emotionally we were nurturing intimacy. Emotionally we were connecting with each other. Spiritually we were connecting with each other. And Monday nights, Bible study nights, we had date nights. Whenever we got married, things shifted a little bit and date nights looked a lot differently. And now what we do, now that I'm pregnant, it's on Sunday nights, we go for a walk and we ask those tough questions. Before we got married, Jared would ask me, the 5 love languages, if I'm being nurtured in all those areas, and then vice versa, I will ask him those. Now that we're married, on our Sunday night walks, we'll ask each other, what are you looking forward to this coming week? What's something that you're dreading? Are there any unresolved issues that we need to work through? Am I loving you emotionally, physically, spiritually? Am I giving you enough gifts, quality time? And the list goes on. We walk for about an hour and a half, maybe 2, at this big old park in the DFW area. And it's a beautiful time for us. And we make sure we carve out time for that because that is priority. That's how we start off our week. We start off our week connecting with each other and engaging with each other. And I will say, it does take work because there are things that will eventually come up. There are things that pop up and we have to say no to because that is sacred. That is our time. That's not necessarily date night for us, but it is a carved out time that resets and starts our week. So if you and your spouse don't have that, I challenge you to implement that in your relationship. Carve out time where even if it's just 5 minutes, start off with that, where you can ask those simple questions and be honest with each other. And obviously sex is important. I don't need to really get into that, but sex is important. And it does shift things whenever you engage in intimacy, at least sexual intimacy. You grow more love for your spouse. There's a deeper bond that's there, and it outfires sometimes. It helps you when you are, really stressed. It's a stress reliever, but it also it's fun, and it's something the Lord created for you and your spouse to bond with each other and also create children. So there's that. The next thing I wanted to talk about is growth, and not necessarily evolution, but growing together. So embracing change is essential for a thriving marriage. As individuals, we change over time, and a healthy marriage allows both partners to grow and change while maintaining their bond. This requires adaptability, open-mindedness, and a commitment to supporting each other's personal growth. This is very broad, but I do want to touch on this because there are times where my husband, like right now, we're going through some major transitions, not just with introducing a child to the world, but in our businesses. And there's just a lot going on. But in that process, I have to be there with him and stand by him. Things are changing. Things are changing for me. And we have to maintain that bond. We have to maintain that commitment and adapt. Things will change. There will be times where financially you guys are on a high and life's great. There will be times where you have to make sacrifices and finances aren't that great and you have to adapt. There's things that you have to give and take. And, when we first started out Canto Shark, my husband's business, I told him, I was like, you got to quit your job. It's time. And I felt it from the Lord. We prayed about it and we were praying about it for months. And eventually I called him one day, I think after he left work, and I said, Jared, it's time. You need to resign. You just got to do it. And obviously as a man, there's all these thoughts, but I'm the provider. I'm supposed to be, making money. What if we don't make money in this venture? What if it fails? And, all these what ifs, but I told him, I will adapt. I will walk with you through this. I will be your right hand. I will hold you up through this process. Just do what I know God has called you to do. Do what I know you are passionate about. And it was challenging, but every single month, the bills got paid. There wasn't a single month where we were scrounging, looking around. How are we going to pay the bills? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? And we just trusted the Lord every single step of the way. And now, Canto Shark is doing phenomenal. We would have never thought a year ago, 2 years ago, this is where the business was going to be, but it didn't happen overnight. Some may look at it and think, oh, you guys were successful, quote unquote, overnight. But no, it took a lot of work and dedication. I quit getting my nails done. We cut back on groceries. We cut back on how much we're spending on electricity. We pivoted and we adapted to a new lifestyle in order to make things work. And obviously we trusted God in the process. So there will be growth. You and your spouse will grow in different areas. Life will change. And in that, the last point I wanted to touch on is weathering storms. Let's just face it. Challenges come, storms come, difficult times come. It's inevitable. Does that mean God is an awful God because times, are hard? No. God is still good despite the challenges. God is still God despite the challenges. Oftentimes, critics and atheists will say, well, if your God was so good, he wouldn't allow this to happen. Well, God is also a God of choices. And with that free will, that ability to choose, there will be sin that enters. If there's good, there's evil. And that's just the reality of it. It doesn't make God any less of who he is. If anything, it makes him more God because he's given us the free will and the ability to choose right from wrong. And for those who choose wrong, there are consequences and there are things that are unanswered. And in a fallen world, there will be sickness, there will be trials, there will be temptations. But whenever storms come, that's the time when I feel like I've bonded with my husband the most. It's not easy. It's not fun, but that's where communication is the most honest. That's where we seek each other's support the most. That's when we lean on each other the most. This past year, Jared was going through some major health stuff. And as a spouse, as a wife, looking at him, I just felt helpless. There was nothing I could do to help him other than just pray. And I say other than just pray, but praying is a big deal. I prayed for him. I anointed him with oil. There were nights where I just sat there praying over him and believing for a miracle. And God provided that miracle, not instant, not overnight, but through dreams, through visions, through different individuals, just confirming the initial dream that Jared had about what it will take for that healing to occur. And, over time, I think within a 6 month to a year period, he's completely healed, 180, completely shift in his health. But these storms only grows us, only brings us closer together. And it's inevitable. But I will say, if you are fighting a storm, if you are fighting to be in a storm, don't fight it. The storm will come, and it's the perfect opportunity for you and your spouse to grow together and to lean on God and to depend on him. Because too often there are moments where we're vibing so great in our marriage. We're vibing and everything is going great. And, oh, you're doing this, I'm doing this, we're thriving. Yeah, all the things. And then we realize, but where's God in this equation? I thought this was a Trinity type of marriage where God, my husband, and myself, but the way we've been pattering and teetering through this marriage, it's just you and I, and we've completely removed God from the equation. So there are moments where, we need to reset and reevaluate. Where are we placing our trust? Are we simply doing life together because we've found a really good groove, or are we truly seeking the Lord every step of the way? So that's what I wanted to talk about in what marriage is. Marriage is beautiful. Marriage is biblical. Marriage is a journey together. The foundation of it is love. It's collaborating with your partner, with your spouse. It's communicating. It's connecting with each other. It's nurturing intimacy. It's growing and evolving as times change. It's weathering storms together. Marriage is beautiful, and I highly recommend it to everyone because it is a wonderful thing. And it's one of the best decisions I've made in my life. And I've 2.5 years in, have not regretted it. And I don't believe that in 52 or 55 years, when my husband and I are still married, that I'll ever regret it, because it's wonderful. And it can be daunting if we dwell on all the negative, quote unquote, things that we see in marriage. But the negative is only a result of not working towards your marriage. The negative is when someone shifts and turns their face from what marriage should be. And, that's a whole other thing. But marriage, it's a great thing. I want to encourage y'all, for those of you who are leery or weary of getting married, for those of you who are in marriage and it's kind of tough and you're going through trials, keep pushing through. You've made a commitment with your spouse, and, it's a wonderful thing. If you need counseling, seek counseling. If you need a mentor, seek a mentor. But look at marriage in the way God designed it to be. Look at it in the way He has created it to be. It's spiritual, it's emotional, it's physical closeness. The Old Testament talks about this heavily. And, marriage, you should thrive. You should be the best version of yourself in marriage, because marriage brings out the worst in you. And the worst in you is what you work on in marriage. So that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode, the core attributes and values of marriage. And I just want to inspire some of you who maybe think that marriage is awful. But marriage, partnership, it's enriching. And there will be challenging parts of it, but that's just a part of the journey, and it's beautiful. And don't forget to subscribe, like, share this episode, and I will see y'all next week on All the Things Podcast.